Hello, I'm Rick, the Batman GM. I am your GM, your game master for the day. I have 40 years of experience. I began playing when I was 12 years old, and my experience runs from old Dungeons and Dragons through Star Wars and Battletech, Shadowrun, and a slew of others. It's always been my philosophy that role-playing games and tabletop board games, gaming as a social medium is a great way for all walks of life to come together and enjoy camaraderie and exploring and stepping out of our comfort zone, if you will. So, this is your place at the table.
Well, my friends, this is the second installment in the Orions package. This would have came in a paper stock kind of folder with sometimes just the two books, or and other times there'll be a version with a game module to go with it. And the concept is basically, in this case, is the Book of Deep Knowledge. This is the GM guide / player handbook for all things Orion. It gives you some better depth of their history and some information that generally the player should not have access to, as well as the stats needed to create the characters within the Orion characters and their process for how they learn their skills and education and advancing themselves. And so as we look at that, we got the introduction. This was copyright 1987. I'm not saying that that's when this was published, but that's what I'm thinking it was. And we got Orions as NPCs. Traditionally, in the older, earliest versions of Star Trek, when most people considered or thought of Orions, they thought as pirates and rogues and other types of nefarious people. When in truth, they're just another species with their own quirks and their own ideas of how the world should function and how they should function within it and how they should interact with everybody. They are the predecessors or precursors to the Ferengi in later TV series, which is kind of sad. We don't see a lot of Orion. We see them very briefly in the early moments of the Calvin version of Star Trek Enterprise. When we see the new Captain Kirk, he's having a visitation with, Uhura's roommate is a green Orion, which I thought was interesting, and she was hiding somebody under the bed, or had just got somebody thrown to toss somebody out the window or something, typical of what people think of the green Orion women. We also see them in the Enterprise TV series, which there's like a two-part interaction where some Orion pirates hijacked and kidnapped a number of the key personnel from the Enterprise, including the Vulcan gal. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. And one of the green Orion enforcers is played by a very well-known WWE wrestler, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head because that's just the way it works when you get old. Anyway, so we got pirates, we got them as merchants. Like I said, they were considered merchants par none, traders. They operated throughout wherever their ships could go, and often get confused. One of the reasons I think it gets downplayed in later episodes when we start seeing the Next Generation, Voyager, DS9, in part is because of this early connection to slavery. And they go to great lengths even back then to explain it's not slavery in the sense that we think of it. It's more like indentured servitude, but it's also an alien way. And that's one of our, and I'm not going to get into a diatribe about social justice warriors and this, that, and the other thing that's affecting the world today, and this need or this concept that somehow or another we need to rewrite how everything works. But we have to keep in mind that other socials, other cultures, other societies operate and view things in a different way. And if we ever encounter alien species from in a galaxy full of them, we'd better get over ourselves, because that's going to be the way of life, and we can't always interfere. And that's one of the things the Federation does a lot of, is interfere. This is one of the reasons the Orions do not join the Federation. They're actually an independent community or nation state within the Federation's sphere of influence, although the Federation is constantly tightening and getting tighter and tighter grip on them, which is it counters everything the Federation claims to stand for. And yet, if we look at the United States today, do we not see a lot of that mindset too? I'm just pointing out, and then there was the British Empire, and the list goes on and on and on. Just saying, right? So, in this case, they're quite a colorful character to operate and to run if you choose to do so. The Orion character generation, speaking of which, there are three subcategories of Orions. There are the Ruddies, which are the most common Orions encountered, which their skin color can run from pale to orangish color to black. I mean, there's no limit in that aspect. They're quite similar to humanity. Then they have the Greens, which are distinctly green, but even then they run a variety of shades of green. And then there's the gray Orions, which are very rarely seen in public, and very few people outside the Orions know about them, and that's because, for good reasons, the not so good for the Greys, mind you, but the Ruddies have done their level best to eliminate them or to subjugate them. The Greys are the technical wizards and inventors and scientists of the Orion culture, and at one time or another they controlled the culture and eventually get overrun and taken over by the Ruddies, who are the administrators, the merchants, so to speak, where the Greens provide the muscle. And they discuss it. Says the majority of Orion population, the Ruddies comprise about 60%. Says we'll need agro-worlds need fewer Ruddies and more Greens to run the farms, while a smaller new colony venture will likely be thoroughly Ruddy. Most players will probably want to run Ruddy Orion characters because they are usually the ones in charge and giving orders. On the other hand, Ruddies generally don't fight, as they can send their menials, and players may find this at a disadvantage. However, Ruddies are definitely not cowards and do have a tradition of individual combat, at least within one's social equals, to settle disputes. Although Greens are only 35% of the total Orion population, Green Orions do the disproportionate amount of work. They're the grunt labor. Boisterous players who roleplay Green Orion characters will get all the fighting they want, while Green Orions can attain social respectability. They're always still inferior to the Ruddies. There's this caste system. And then the Greys are not seen in public or discussed for a couple of good reasons. First, other Orions consider them disgusting, unwholesome, and unworthy of being alive. They are kept under wraps, usually deep underground or hidden in life support chambers because of their deformities and disabilities. Some have twisted limbs, some are missing limbs entirely, some cannot stand the light, others are sensitive to the smallest amount of dust. This is not how they were originally, but other Orions have made them this way. Without the constant expensive care, most would soon die without exposed to air, light, food, or water. Smaller humanoid beings. The gray Orions are kept because they possess talents that no other Orions do. They are good with machines and understand higher mathematics and physics, etc., etc. Alright, so there's so many layers of stuff going on. Then we got the half-breed, the half Orion, which you don't hear a whole lot of in Star Trek. You don't hear the references to half this or half that. We have a handful, where the most well-known is Spock, of course, half Vulcan, and there's a handful of others, right? But this downplay is not considered a playable race like you would a half-elf. It's just... But we do have some mechanics for it. I'm told there are probably no more than 50 odd Orion half-breeds throughout the galaxy. Unless disguised, they can never venture near any Orion colony without risking their lives. Greens will tear them apart. Ruddies will shoot them down like vermin, etc., etc. Generating tribute scores. Instead of create attribute scores for Orions according to the method in Trader, Captains, and Merchant Princess 2nd edition. Roll 4d10 and add 30 for the character Character strength, endurance, intelligence, dexterity, and charisma stores. For luck and psionics, roll 1d100. Then apply racial modifiers to the following from the following table. The Book of Deep Knowledge has no provisions for educating half-breed characters at culture they are not considered Orion. They'll have to find their education and careers elsewhere. So if you end up choosing to be a half Orion, you're going to have been most likely raised in the Federation by your Federation parent and or by the Federation in general. Background skills, family status. As Orions make fine distinctions in status, the social economic table provides standing a character's family in comparison to others. It's important to consider that for the Orions, family is everything to some degree. Family first, then the community, and then or family first, then themselves, then the community. And it's just the way it is. Space training, traders, explorers, all the information you need to create them as fields of specialization, explorer specialty training tables. Orion Space Navy, which in most regards, including pay, the duties of the Orion Space Navy generally resemble those of the Starfleet Command. Although legally restricted to the boundaries of Orion space, the OSN frequently ventures into the neutral zone and into the Triangle, protects the commerce within these areas, but cannot enter the Federation even in pursuit of a fleeing pirate, without first notifying Starfleet. Blah, blah, blah. Naval Officer Specialty Training Tables, basic training, command school, career advancement, how you can advance your character, length of term, character aging, Orion generation, handicaps, a lot of negative stuff here for being a gray Orion. Background skills, fields of specialization, unauthorized skills, character aging, career advancement. Then we talk green slave women generation. When non-Orions use the expression green slave women, they're referring to what the Orions call Lodubyan, Lodubyain, the sensuous, animal-like, half-naked creatures glimpsed at in Orion entertainments, like women, some say, but more so. The green slave women are not separate subspecies, neither are they in any way genetically modified, surgically altered, or doped with Venus drugs. They're simply highly trained caste of female slaves educated from the earliest childhood to be dancers, singers. In a way, they're like geisha, in the sense of the Japanese concept of geisha. They're not hookers. I'm just saying that's not what they're portrayed as. Training, unlike other Orions, the low man received no background skills at the age of 5, placed in the care of a senior retired, blah, blah, blah. Once again, sounds a lot like the geisha. Skill improvement, savings. At some point they reach a certain point where they're going to get out of this particular line of work and set themselves up in something else. Transition, which is what it talks about. And then we got the history of the Orions, the origins. These are something else. This is a very crazy, deep, convoluted history. It's definitely beta canon and not alpha canon. Thousands of years have been all erased any traces of Orion prehistory. Here and there, ancient copies of still more ancient books cite from the pre-Adam War historian Noah in his lost work, The Origin of People. Supposedly, Noah had access to other now lost manuscripts that discuss non-native origin for the Orions, who may have been planted on Bochok by aliens. The trail is old and unreliable. From the same age comes the data referring to the gods that once lived on Bochok, but fought a war, changed their ways, and left to keep other worlds from their folly, blah, blah. And Rigelians, who are also a sentient race who lives in the same system, named after themselves, in cohabitation to some degree with the Orions, although they tend to keep to themselves, kept the records from everyone, including the Orions, blah, blah, blah. Said the Rigelians know fairly well who the Orions are, who the preservers were, and what happened to their son, what created a race. The Rigelians themselves go back and they maintain their history pretty thick, and it's very complicated and complex. And like I said, I'm going to do a different video on that particular subject, because the other book of common knowledge really goes to great levels to explain how this works. Anyway, growth in the empire, the reverse, the fate of the Greys, all these are subject to potentially different videos at some point. The timeline, we're going back 10 million years, Rigel 3 and 4 inhabited by the shore, an advanced spacefaring race, and subsequent 10 million years, these worlds will produce 3 more native civilizations to be occupied by countless others. It's one of the things that they make a note of in the Beta Canon, and mention it very lightly in Alpha Canon, the old Alpha Canon, is that the Orion homeworlds, the planets of the Rigelian system, the Rigel 6, 7, 3, 4, what have you, are very ancient worlds, and there's evidence that their three suns have actually been revitalized, refilled with helium or the elements they need to continue to function. That numerous space advanced civilizations have been born, developed, thrived, expanded, and collapsed, and a new one came along, and over tens of millions of years. The planets themselves, because of the central location in this particular area of the Alpha Quadrant, lends them to being a natural trade route hub for a lot of races over the eons, and it's evidenced and constant, or every now and then, some kind of artifact or information or bit of an ancient starfaring ship being uncovered or discovered in on one of the planets or in the system, which allows this to be a very rich environment for roleplay, in my opinion. I have ran 2 campaigns dealing with the Orions and from being Orion, and they were really interesting. A very different take on Star Trek, because you're looking from the outside in. Federation is a foe or an NPC that you're constantly competing against or combating at some level. Fusion is a way of life, politics and ethics, their governments, and there's distinct differences between the homeworld government and the colonies and the individual colonies. And then there's the corporations, which play huge roles within the social and economic structure of the Orions, and then the families, which are come first, and then there's primacy of business, loyalty, revenge, spite. The Orions love life, they live life, they're hedonistic in many forms. But one of the things that set them apart, that they're masters of revenge. They will go to great lengths to get that revenge. This talks about a story here about an Orion woman whose husband is killed, and then she goes to great lengths, even though she knows that at the end of the day she's going to see her whole family bloodline more or less self-destruct. And when her husband's older brother realizes he's been duped, he pretty much is the one who kills off the family, and he does it knowing that full well what he's doing, but the price of revenge demands it. Pirate economy, economics, that's the other thing that's commonly attributed to Orions being pirates. All Orions are pirates, which is not true, but there's a significantly larger percentage of freebooters, and most Orions will take advantage of a situation. So if you leave your ship unlocked, you're and parked on some remote area, and some Orions show up, you'd be lucky if you find it still sitting there, because hey, obviously somebody didn't want it, or they wouldn't have left it out here in the open. They wouldn't have left it unlocked. And okay, so it was locked, but it was easy to pick the lock. They wouldn't have left it out here in the open, etc., etc. There's always justification. Pirate tactics, outposts in space, interstellar relations with the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, and the Triangle. The Orion campaign, small ship crews, family planets, corporate might, So your campaign could be a single ship and its crew doing what Orions do. You could be working for your family, following up on family business and so on and so forth. You could be working for a corporation or for the government. So we have a character generation form and the data sheet or the player sheet for an Orion. There you have it. The Orions, the Book of Deep Knowledge.